Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Day in History, our nightly look back at a specific day in history, where we take a look back at a specific day in history. Now, tonight I'm going to change things up a little bit. At first, I'm going to talk about the Democratic primary because I want to talk about it and give you my thoughts on what occurred um, yesterday. And we're going to take a look at a person born on this day, March 11th. And let me tell you, there was a tremendous amount of people to choose from. It was hard narrowing it down to one person. But some of the people that I thought about picking, I will choose their date of death to cover them because they were great choices. And I may have to go back, do a history rewind to do one of them. So, I want to talk about the Democratic primary uh, that occurred yesterday. Some of the media dubbed it Super Tuesday 2. I would say Mini Tuesday is a better description. We had primary elections in Mississippi, Missouri, Michigan, Firehouse primary in North Dakota, Idaho, and Washington. So the M's got some love last night. And Joe Biden had fairly convincing victories in the M's and is leading right now in the state of Washington. In Mississippi, Biden apparently, at the moment, with 100% of the precincts reporting, is holding Sanders to under viability statewide. Just a massive victory. In Missouri, Biden had a huge victory there. And in Michigan, he had a very impressive victory. And as most people remember, in 2016, Michigan is a place where Sanders pulled off a surprise win and really is one of the places that people were like, oh my, he may be really giving Hillary a run for her money. Because after New Hampshire, which is a small state, in Iowa, this was a huge state and a huge manufacturing state where people were like, Hillary might have a problem in the Midwest. I think it's a fait accompli now that Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee. He had a huge victory last night. He got 1.9 million votes, and Sanders got about 1.2. Of the delegates awarded so far, of the 352 delegates up for grabs last night, 184 has been won by Biden and 112 by Sanders. It's 864 to 710 in total delegates. And the remaining primaries don't look good for Bernie Sanders now that it's a two-person race, because now that it's a two-person race, big leads are harder to overcome. And next Tuesday is going to be very, very brutal for Bernie Sanders. There's Florida, there's Ohio, Illinois, and Arizona. Florida is going to be really bad. The polling looks horrible out of there. I think if he looks at the results honestly from Michigan, he has to really question how effective he can be in Ohio. Illinois is another state, and a state in which African American voters on the Democratic side play a huge role, and Sanders has really struggled with them. Arizona, while Sanders has performed well with Latino voters, um, that's a state that's trending blue. But I think the Sanders mode of progressivism and Democratic politics just doesn't play well in Arizona. Kristen Sinema, the very popular and wonderful Democratic senator from Arizona, has endorsed Joe Biden. So I will say this: I did not believe a turnaround like this was possible after Nevada. I thought that if Biden could survive South Carolina and limp through Super Tuesday without getting obliterated and made it to the other side, that he could make a fight for the nomination on this side. I did not believe that he would be in the driver's seat cruising towards the nomination. Now, this is not to say that if he doesn't continue to work diligently that he can lose it, but he is in control and he just has to land the plane now. If Sanders does poorly in those states next week, I think there will be a lot of pressure on Sanders to drop out. There is pressure now, but I think the pressure is only going to increase. So it is the race I thought it would be for a long time. Sanders versus Biden. But it is accelerating at a very quick pace. And Democratic voters across the country are making their voice known that they want Joe Biden to be their nominee. And we're going to start to really get the battles between Biden and Sanders. The one-on-one contest where you get to these states where voters have not had early voting stretched out over 3 months or since January. It's a very confined time, and it's Biden and Sanders. And I think in that scenario, it bodes very well for Joe Biden. And don't forget, we've got Georgia later this month. And speaking of the state of Georgia, births. Born on this day in Mableton, Georgia in 1948 was Roy Barnes. And Roy Barnes was governor of Georgia from 1999 until 2003. And Roy Barnes took one of the most courageous political acts of all time. He took executive action to change the Georgia state flag from the 1956 racist Confederate flag version to minimize the Confederate flag emblem on the flag. He changed it to a design that was only the state flag for a very short time. And the man that defeated him, Sonny Perdue, who is now the Secretary of Agriculture, would change it to a more wholesome, and I'm going to use that phrase loosely, image of the Confederate flag. The Georgia state flag was changed in 1956 to a version that really emphasized the Confederate flag. And they did this because of the Civil Rights Movement. There's no other way to interpret it. And this was becoming, at this time, a huge issue for Georgia, especially as more business moved into Georgia. Georgia had an influx of residents from out of state, and Georgia realized we have a huge minority population that might find this offensive, and Roy Barnes changed the flag, and it cost him re-election. White voters in the state revolted, and he lost re-election. And most people agree that this cost him re-election. He was defeated in 2002 in a very good year for Republicans. It was a midterm election. It was George W. Bush's first midterm election, and unlike most presidents, George W. Bush had a really good night that night. And Georgia was a state where not only did Republicans pick up the governor's mansion, they picked up a Senate seat as well. And we'll probably talk about that Senate race at another time. Just a very nasty race. But this governor's race, Roy Barnes changed the state flag, and it cost him. And he won a Profile and Courage Award for it. And I agree that he should have won that award because he did the right thing. It cost him politically. He lost his job. He lost the governor's mansion. But it was the right thing to do. And I've never read anywhere that Roy Barnes regrets that decision. And if I was Roy Barnes and I'd been in that position, I hope that I would have made that decision. And he was not the first governor to propose doing this. Other governors had proposed it. Zell Miller proposed doing it. And even after Zell Miller won a second term, he sat on his hands and did nothing. You know, Zell Miller could have ran for re-election in 1994, did it, won, and with the Olympics 2 years away, done this, but he didn't. So, I think that Roy Barnes should be applauded. He was a very powerful governor. His nickname was King Roy, and he was a Democratic governor in a rapidly changing South. And he had control of both houses of the legislature. It's why he was able to get things accomplished. He had a very accomplished record, but voters apparently in Georgia could not forgive the sin in their mind of changing the state flag. I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great night.